Nee, ich habe ein Problem schon. Doch.
All right, I'm just checking with the organizers that everybody can hear me. This is a sound test. Can somebody confirm that you can hear me?
I can hear you, Christine. I'm Christiana.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Christiana. And as soon as I have the go, we can get on starting with the conference. So if somebody could just give me a good go from the organizing team, perhaps Andressa, if you could write me that message, and I will begin in haste. Welcome, 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 everybody. Welcome, welcome, just monitoring. All right. Okay, as I see more people are coming on stream as we go along, I just want to get that confirmation. Andressa, are we all good to get going? Is it all systems go before I officially begin the business of the day? If I could just get that confirmation as to start. All right, ladies and gentlemen, just give us 3 more minutes. We're just getting our technical house in order. As I'm sure you can appreciate, the virtual platform means we have to make sure all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted before we officially get going. But you are at the right place at the right time, and you're in for a wonderful, wonderful program. Thank you so much to everybody who has been so punctual. So 3 minutes more, and we will be getting underway. Welcome. I see more and more people are coming on stream. To those joining us via live stream as well, a welcome to you. Bear with us another 2 minutes and we'll be getting underway. We just want to make sure that we take off with everybody on board with all systems go. But you are at the right place. We will be resuming, or in fact, getting started, taking off shortly.
Mas isso para que a gente não consegue resolver isso paralelamente, vamos começar? Beleza. Okay.
All righty, fantastic. We have the go now. Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to this Climate Action Conference. We're gathered here today about the business of joining forces for climate action. We're looking at it from the perspectives of civil society from Africa and Europe. My name is Christine Mudwa and I am your host, and I'm excited to be in your company today. I know that a number of people registered for today's conference. We have about an excess of 350 people who showed the interest of taking part in this conference. It tells you that this is really a conversation of the time, and I am very, very, very excited to be moderating this conversation, and I'll be your host today. And I'm looking forward, ladies and gentlemen, to your engagement. The pandemic has kept us apart, but in a way, the virtual platform has brought more of us together. And I'm thrilled to say that we've got people joining us from really all over the world. And that's what makes for a meaningful, meaningful conversation. Players in civil society, both in Europe and in Africa. Of course, the relationship between our two continents goes back a long while. And now we have yet another opportunity to reset those ties, to create partnerships in the form of climate change action and climate change policy that will ensure a greener future. We talk of a brighter future, but the lingo of the day, ladies and gentlemen, is a greener future for the future generations. So as I said, I'm your host, Christine Mudwa from Zimbabwe, and I'm thrilled to be in the Berlin capital today, where I am hosting this conversation from. Thank you so much to everybody who's taken the time to be with us today. I did mention it a little earlier, but we are in for it today. We are definitely in for it. There are opportunities, there are partnerships that we can engage in, and that is what the conversation today is about. I just want to get a few housekeeping items out of the way so that we can go. Of course, being on the virtual platforms means there are a few things that we need to look out for. So I'll start by saying that this conference, we're trying to reach as many people as possible. We've made it accessible to people who may prefer to be speaking French. So I will point out the fact that we have a French translation as we go along. So if you prefer to be hearing this in French, if you're on the Zoom platform, please go onto the globe icon right at the bottom if you're in the webinar, and that will immediately take you to the French translation. We also will have at some point one of our speakers speaking in French. For the English translation, you would do the exact same thing, but we'll get to that when you're there. I also want to introduce my colleague next to me, who is Helse Borenstein. She is bringing us the international sign interpretation, and she is over there right next to me. It's good to have you along. She will be partnering with Cindy Cave, who we will see later throughout the day. So again, this is about inclusivity. Now, I'll point out to those joining us via the live stream, unfortunately, you cannot access the the international sign interpretation, and that is, of course, because of the limitations of the platform. So if you are on the webinar, you can access that. But if you're joining us via the live stream, if you're on YouTube, for example, that might not be accessible to you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to be talking any much more. And to my speakers whom I'll be introducing you throughout the conversation, it's the normal etiquette. You know, it is the microphones muted when you're not speaking. At some point, we will also ask for people to deactivate their videos as well. But at the moment, I want to bring in two ladies to join me now. Make this a triple threat, so to say. Christiane Averbeck and Heiko Spielmans. Ladies, come on board, fire up those videos. I can see you over there, and unmute those microphones, because you are going to give us a sense of what it is that we're gathered about here today. Heiko, I want to start by putting you on the spot. Venro, of course, has brought us this conference in partnership with Klima Alliance. But give us a sense of why we're gathered here today. And of course, Venro has a lot to do with that. Heiko?
Thank you. Thank you, Christine. And also from my side, a welcome, a very hearty welcome to everybody who has joined us so far. I think since the outbreak of the corona pandemic, the concept of global solidarity has been on everyone's lips. At least we've heard it in the speeches and political speeches a lot, and people think a lot about global solidarity. But at the same time, we also witness that the climate impacts are rising rapidly. And millions of people already, especially in lower income countries, are living with the effects of climate change. Homes have become uninhabitable, farms unfarmable, access to clean water is unpredictable in many cases, and a lot of lives have become unbearable. So, and we also know at the same time that the people suffering most from climate change effects are the ones that are who are least responsible for it. So the question is, what does solidarity mean with respect to climate change and in the international relations? How have especially those countries like Germany, like other European countries, like the European Union, which have a historical responsibility for climate change, performed so far? And what can be learned for the future? And the object of today's conference is to look at these questions and strengthen the solidarity and partnership between the African continent, the countries and people from Africa and Europe. And we want to look at ideas to tackle climate change together and what we can do to urge governments to take bold and more ambitious action, and to do it now. And as you mentioned, Venro, I want to say that this conference is part of a bigger project that we do as Venro. Venro, by the way, is the German platform of development and humanitarian aid NGOs in Germany. And the project is a EU presidency project, which is funded mainly by the European Union. And we are together in it with partner platforms from the presidency countries, which are Portugal and Slovenia at the moment. And together with these partners and with the Brussels-based network Concord, in this project, we advocate for a European Union that puts the 2030 agenda at the front, as well as international solidarity, human rights, active participation of civil society. And this conference is also part of this project.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Heike. Christiane, I want to bring you in here as well, because Climate Alliance or Klima Alliance has partnered in this particular event in bringing us this conference. Tell us why you're in it and from your stake as Climate Alliance.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's a great opportunity to engage here with so many different people from all over the world, which is really exciting that we have through this platform, through this conference, the opportunity also not only sit in Germany and discuss these issues in Germany, but have the opportunity to engage with partners, for example, in Africa. Now, Climate Alliance was founded in 2007 by 40 organizations, and by then it were church organizations, development organizations, those that had interest in ecological aspects. And by then they said, we have to push the German government, the German politicians to be more ambitious on climate-related issues. And I think also through the efforts of Climate Alliance, the climate movement grew. And now we have 140 organizations in Germany organized in Climate Alliance Germany. And now also social organizations such as trade unions, gender organizations, youth organizations have joined those that were already there. And they have one common interest, and that is, pushing for the implementation of the Paris Agreement. And in that, for sure, we have a common interest with FENRO to fight not only the climate crisis, but Heike mentioned it already, right. That we are also into the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And that's right. Why we are the natural partners, and we had been for a long time with FENRO.
So, Christiane, we're not just firefighting here, essentially, right? No. This isn't just about firefighting, but there are opportunities here. I want to give you a few more seconds to talk about some of those opportunities, and then we'll wrap up and get into the conversation. So just tell us about some of those opportunities.
Yeah, actually, we want to deepen some of the answers we actually already got. I mean, we know already that it is important now to achieve 100% renewables, not only in Germany or Europe, but also in Africa. So we want to discuss what does it need, what kind of partnerships to strengthen these efforts into going into 100% renewables. The other issue that came up just in the last year, I would say, at least in Germany, is the whole issue of hydrogen. Because we need hydrogen, green hydrogen, produced through renewables, and we need it not only produced in Germany, but also produced in Africa. This is what we want to discuss, how to go about this. And also to mention some other aspects we want to discuss is climate finance, as we see that the money is not enough that we get international. I mean, we've pushed as civil societies, our government, to spend more on climate finance. We are not happy about what we have got up to now, but the little money that we got, we have to use in a proper way. And we want to discuss as African and German civil societies how we can spend the money wisely.
Right. And of course, we are going to be having workshops as part of this conference. If you look at the invite, we're going to be breaking it down. I'll give you some of the topics in the workshops that we'll be having, and I'm sure you've probably decided which part you'll be taking in. But we've got shaping energy cooperation in Africa to leap forward towards 100% renewable energies. We've got the hydrogen hype. You were referring to hydrogen there. More money well spent, climate finance priorities from an African and a European civil society perspective, as well as climate-induced migration. So so those are some of the breakaway workshops that you can take part in to further this conversation. So thank you for that, Christian. And Heike, I'll end off with you before we open up really. And I just wondered, what are your questions coming into this conference? What are some of the questions you have that you hope that by the end of the day, we would have at least discussed the answers to?
Well, these are actually my questions. I don't know whether they are the right questions. People have to decide on that in the discussion. But if I look at the issue of climate change, sustainable development, and the Europe and Africa, there's one thing that comes to my mind, that up to now, sustainable development has remained elusive for many African countries because of poverty. Poverty is still a major challenge in Africa, in African countries. And a large part of the rural population still has no access to electricity. And it's clear that the continent needs important investments in infrastructure. So these investments will be very important for the development, not only of the African countries, but for the whole world in the next year. So my question is this concept, the framework of sustainable development, really shared by people and especially by leaders in African country, or is it still the prevailing common vision that, we need growth, any kind of growth just to fight poverty? And what can civil society organizations do together to advocate for the right kind of investments that we need, especially in Africa? This is, for instance, one of the questions I think which is important for the future. At the moment, the pollutions in Africa and their contributions to the emittance is still very, very low. It's under 10%. But these investments will, set the path for the future. And so I think they are very important.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Christiane Averbeck and Heike Spielmans, thank you. We're now going to pivot to our main discussion of the day. And I'm going to ask that our participants taking part in the next panel, if you could now all turn on your videos. I just want to introduce you to the audience. So I see they are here, and I'm just waiting for them to turn on their videos. Fantastic, here we are coming on slowly but surely, waiting for a few others so that we can see everybody. And I'll briefly introduce, I see Pia, I see Hindu, great to see you ladies, looking fantastic as always. Waiting for Dr. Henrietta Pierretta, if she could also fire on. Let's just give it a few seconds over there. But yes, I will be telling you that right, so I just want to briefly introduce them to you. We're going to be having Her Excellency Ambassador Josefa Sako, who will be joining us momentarily. We have Dr. Pierretta Hetzberger-Bufana, a member of the European Parliament. There she's come on. Good to see you, Doctor. We'll be hearing from you shortly as well. We have Oveis Samad, who is Deputy Executive Secretary at UNFCCC. He's got some important information for us in terms of our targets and everything that we're doing. Pia, as we've seen her there, she's the head of climate policy at the climate delegation. Good to see you, Pia. And of course, Hindu, who I mentioned last. Hindu, I'm excited to see you because I know a thing or two about you. Now, this morning, I'm pretty sure those of us who were looking to get dressed for the day might have checked our weather apps and thought, what is the weather for the day? But let me tell you something, however reliable your technology is, it's not as reliable as Hindu's gran, who could, just by stepping and looking outside, could tell you the forecast of the day. And even if the sky was blue with the sun shining, she could even tell you if it was going to rain, even if it didn't look like it, and indeed it did rain. So Hindu, I'm excited about having you on. I'm going to introduce you because I feel like in these circles, you need little introduction, but I will still go on and say that you are an environmental activist. Hindu is a member of the Chad's pastoralist Bororo community. She began advocating for indigenous rights and environmental protection at the age of 16. The first time I saw Hindu, she was addressing world leaders at the UN, where she made an empowering case for the action that was needed because people in her community are feeling the effects of climate change. You heard that from Heike, that it's the people who are contributing the least to this problem that are feeling its impact the most. Hindu's vision, ladies and gentlemen, is to grow support for both traditional knowledge as well as science to improve resilience to climate change, especially for rural communities. I'm going to hand over to Hindu now because she's going to be telling us about the urgency of the problem, but also how she has experienced climate change through her personal experience. Hindu, it is now over to you. To my other speakers, I'll ask you for now to turn off your videos as well as your microphones, and you will now be seeing Hindu. For those who are on the webinar, Cindy Cave has taken over for our international sign interpretation. Hindu, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Christine. I'm also so excited to be with you today here and to be with all the organizers. Allow me to thank you for these very important and on time right now panels, because, you know, for me, it is today that the Europe and Africa cooperation, that can be not more, because we are facing a lot of crises, and all of us know, and I hear from the previous speakers. So I'm very happy because I do believe the European Green Deal should inspire African leaders in designing the response to COVID and of course the climate change, as we are already suffering. And Christine, you said how my peoples are the most impacted from this climate change. And you know, while we are talking just right now today, a lot of African leaders are gathered in Paris here to discuss a very important issues, the debt cancellation. That has a way to help Africans to deal with the COVID pandemic. So it is going to be a real cooperation between Africa and Europe. Let us see the result of this gathering. But so for me, the time is right now to discuss collectively about climate change and the green recovery. It is time because in my country, also Christine, you say, we already facing the 1.5 degrees Celsius of the global warming. We already lost the Paris Agreement objective because we are facing a different crisis where COVID increasing. You know, for those last years, I mean, the last decade, I can say, we are having 1 year of the floods, another years of the drought that destroying the crops and people facing the food insecurity. We have over 50 degrees Celsius where our elders and our cattle are just experiencing this heat wave. Then with all those drought and floods, the extreme weather events, we already becoming more vulnerable. But I'm not here to describe to you how we are facing the climate impact, because it is already out into the news, and even people do believe it or not, it is impacting our health and impacting our economy. The poorest are already suffering the consequences of those crises that increase inequality. Let me give you just a quick examples. You know, in the rural area, when markets have been closed because of the COVID-19, people simply do not eat daily or weekly because they depend from a daily exchange of the product or selling of the product. And when they close the market, it is not like Europe that you can order through internet and get your food. You have to get out to the market. And if you didn't get there, you are most impacted. And as they do not have access to the vaccine, even to a social protection, they are the first one who are suffering from the consequence of the COVID. And they will be the last one who can be protected. This is the inequality adding to this climate impact. But that is why, of course, we need to partner with African countries to get access to vaccine. But the response need to go away further than a sanitarian crisis, because there is no vaccine for climate change at all. So we need a deal, a great deal for Africa that will help us to rebuild our economy and face the bigger challenge of our century, eradicate poverty and combat climate change. Because I consider that the future of our youngest continent on Earth cannot be a changing climate, conflict, and even migration. We need to build another future for our youth. So we need a green deal with a green job for our youth, because I'm coming from a country where we have more than 70% of younger peoples. And to fight climate change, we have a lot of African solutions that should be supported. And of course, as Christine said, my grandmother is the best app ever because she knows how to live in harmony with the nature and learning from her own ecosystem. So we are one of the continents with the most important potential for a renewable energy. I hear that also from the previous speakers. But in African countries, a lot of people is still experiencing power cut every day. It is the case in my own town, Gemena. You know, when they cut the electricity and it's come back, we just like screaming and chanting. Since I get born to now, even our children are facing that. The electricity is back, is a joy. It's have to change because we also saw that all those last years, the renewable energy become the most cheapest and can be accessible. And in our continent can be the first continent with the power who can be renewable if we are all more smart. It is a very important advantage that Europe also can take the opportunities, because in Europe, you're still using the fossil fuel and the coal mine to produce electricity that is increasing the inequality on climate change impact. We have our African solutions in agriculture also. Let me give you also a quick examples. I am coming from a nomadic pastoralist communities who are a cattle herders. Our main economy is based on production of the milk as our food, but we are doing it in a smart green way. I am so happy to share with you that the Fulani, my communities, we produce a zero carbon milk and meat because we work in collaboration with our ecosystem. Our cattle contribute to restore our ecosystem because they are following the rhythm of the season to find water and pastures. Doing so, our cow contribute to refertile the land for the farmers to grow crops. Working with the nature help us to already meet the Paris Agreement neutrality, while in Europe agriculture is 50 to 20% of greenhouse gas emission. So agriculture and renewable energy should be the two pillars of the African Green Deal. We can add, of course, building resilience, but we can add the indigenous people's traditional knowledge who can help us face the extreme weather events. So my message to you today, we have a lot of African solutions that can be invested. Leaders both in Europe, in Africa, have the coming years to be a very responsible, very important responsibility for all of them. They can either decide to ignore this potential and let our continent in the middle of the crisis, or they can decide to build an African Green Deal that Europe could support and benefit from it, because climate change do not have any frontiers and do not respect any visa application. So it is up to African leaders to work with their communities to build a plan, to work with indigenous peoples, and to partnership with European countries that can develop a solutions for all of us. We have to all together get out from the fossil fuel and coal mine, because those are the ones who are taking us in what is happening today. And it is up to Europe leaders to start to look at Africa not as a problem, but as a solution to get inspiration. For instance, I am advocating for countries to commit to support $1 billion investment on indigenous peoples-led solutions, because indigenous peoples are only 5% of the world's populations, but we managed to protect 80% of the remaining world's biodiversity. And protecting biodiversity, oceans, forests, it's the smartest way to protect our climate. It is something very concrete, reachable, we can be able to implement in the COP26 in Glasgow, and also to the Europeans' Green Deals to get inspired. So it will be also the proof that the Green Deal, it's not only a concept, it is a way to work together for our common future. I'm looking forward for this discussion, and I hope that we will find the solution as a civil society part. We are the bigger one who can take the decisions and change the concept and make the solutions known for the peoples and for the planet. Thank you so much, Christine. I'm so excited to be here and looking forward to hear all of you.
Fantastic, Hindu. Thank you so much as ever. And you're right, there is no vaccine for climate change. We are going to talk of the COVID-19 pandemic as something that happened in the past. But the climate change situation is with us. It is a crisis that demands our immediate attention. And unlike COVID-19, we cannot just take shots in the arms and we call it over. Thank you so much for that, Hindu. I want to see if Ambassador Sako is now with us. I see she's on the platform. Ambassador Sako, if you could please turn on your video to confirm that you are here, because you would then be our next speaker. So before I introduce her, I just want to establish that Ambassador Sako is indeed here. Ambassador, please turn on your video so that we can get into the introduction. I'll give that a few moments while you're digesting those words from Hindu, an impassionate plea. There are people facing the reality of climate change. I see the ambassador there right now. So good afternoon, Her Excellency. This is Ambassador Josefa. We hear you, Ambassador.
I cannot hear you.
Okay, Ambassador, let us just establish if...
Hello? The sound is not... Hello? I can't hear you.
Okay.
Let me restart connecting again. Can I? Let me start connecting, reconnect. Yeah, just now. Yeah.
Okay, Ambassador. Okay, Ambassador. While she's doing that, and perhaps if somebody could just perhaps indicate to me if it happens to be my particular audio setup, if it's just the ambassador who can't hear me. But I think everybody says, okay, so it appears somebody has just given me the feedback. The ambassador needs to reset. Okay,
Hello?
she is doing that. Right.
Now it's better.
Oh, fantastic, Ambassador. I just want to introduce you briefly to our audience here. This is Her Excellency Ambassador Josefa Sako. She is Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Environment at the African Union Commission. Ambassador Sako is a leading African agronomist. Prior to her election to the African Union in 2017, she was special advisor to 2 ministers in Angola. She advised the Angolan Minister of Environment, where she also served as the ambassador responsible for climate change. And she is advised the Minister of Agriculture in charge of food security and poverty reduction. There was a call in Hindu's address to us, to African leadership, and Ambassador Sako is here to tell us about Africa's commitment to climate change. I will now hand over to you, Ambassador Sako.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Good afternoon from Addis Ababa. Good morning, depending on your geographical location. Esteemed panelists, ladies and gentlemen, and all protocol duly observed. I would like to thank you, the organizer, for the invitation to participate in this very important high-level panel. Let me first of all try to contextualize it on the COVID pandemic that Africa is facing. The COVID pandemic represents the greatest threats that we have confronted in our lifetime. Records available indicates that Africa has to date been less impacted by the direct health impact of COVID-19, in spite of the second wave, which is proving to be more deadly, whether due to a younger population that we have in Africa, maybe from the previous experience in dealing with outbreak of contagious diseases, such like as Ebola, or a warmer climate or lower population mobilities. All these factors might contribute to that. The economic impact, however, are proving to be very severe. Inadequate social safety net, a large informal sector, widespread poverty level, crumbling health system, and limited space, as well as rising debts, have left government ill-equipped to deal with the profound economic disruption caused by the pandemic. As at April 8 this year, less than 22% of the 690 million COVID-19 vaccine doses administered globally have been in Africa, according to the WHO, the World Health Organization, and the continent may not reach herd immunity against COVID-19 until 2023, if this trend does not change. From an environment and sustainable development perspective, despite contributing only about 4% of global greenhouse gases, Africa is reeling from the negative impact of climate change, which has been compounded by the pandemic. The pandemic, however, gives us an opportunity to build back better and greener in adapting to the new reality, new normal. Unfortunately, the OECD Green Recovery Database indicates that even for developed countries, the spending allocation to green measures represents only around 17% of the COVID-19 recovery spending announced by governments. So Africa working under the guidance of the African Ministries of Environment has adopted a green stimulus program to support the continent overall recovery program from COVID-19 and contribute towards attaining the targets set by Agenda 2063, the African We Want, the Paris Agreement, and as well as the Sustainable Development Goal. So I will just share with you, because of the time, I will share with you the 12 key areas of the African Green Stimulus package that we identify to work and mobilize money so that we can build back better for the continent. Improving air quality, enhancing chemical and waste management, and promoting the circular economy. I will not expand on that because of the time. Conserving biodiversity and combating the illegal wildlife exploitation and trade, revitalizing ecotourism and the biodiversity economy, combating land degradation, desertification and drought, enhancing climate action, investing in blue economy, scaling up climate smart agriculture and food security system, supporting sustainable management of forests, improving water conservation and use, investing in renewable energy. Just the previous speaker was talking about the accessibility to renewable energy, which is cheaper for the continent, developing smart city and promoting green urbanization. And the last is enhancing information, communication, and technology. In order to achieve the objective of our program, the following need to be put in place: immediate and urgent innovation. 1, 2, short to medium term intervention of 2 to 3 years. 3, long-term transformative intervention to support growth of key green economy sector and build resilience to future shocks in Africa towards 2030. We need a lot of support, including from Europe, to implement the plan, both in terms of capacity building and finance. Finally, ahead of the COP26 climate change conference in Glasgow in November 2021, African countries are committed to updating and upscaling their national determined contribution, the NDCs, to highlight the sector with the greatest potential for green recovery and job creation. There is need for enhanced international investment and financial, technology, and capacity building support to aid this effort. In this regard, developed countries, including Europe, need to provide new, additional, adequate, and predictable financial resources, both from public and private sector, to the climate-related funds, in particular the Adaptation Fund, the Global Environment Facility, and the Green Climate Fund for developing countries to reflect the level of ambition and climate action. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Ambassador, thank you very much for that. Apologies. I am guilty of the first blooper of the day. It's usually people forget to turn on to unmute. I had forgotten to put on my video. Ambassador, we thank you so much for that. And I think we're hearing from the leadership of the continent that there are some commitments that are being made on the continent to climate change efforts. We'll be discussing more of those with her in the question and answer session. And I will point out to our audience that there is a Q&A function if you're on the Zoom platform that is specifically for you to relay questions that you would like for me to pose to the panelists. You've heard from some of them in terms of their opening remarks. We certainly would like to welcome your questions as we go along, and I will be incorporating that into the discussion. Without wasting any more time, I would like to introduce my next speaker, but I'm just going to give the audience a heads up that before she starts speaking, you are going to need to change your language function so you can hear the English translation. She will be speaking to us in French. So those of you who would like to hear it in English, if you go down to the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is an icon. Don't click it yet because you still need to hear me in English. And there you will be able to access the English translation when she starts speaking in French. So without wasting any more time, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Pierrette Hetsberger-Fofana, who is a member of the European Parliament. She is in the group of the Greens, the European Free Alliance. Anybody following European politics will know the Greens are on the rise on this continent, and she is a representation of that. Now, she has been campaigning for a democratic and a humane Europe as a MEP. She is first Vice Chancellor of the Committee on Development and the Delegation for Relations with the Pan-African Parliament. Bonjour, Dr. Fofana. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself now and to take the floor. And a reminder to our audience, now is that moment to go on, and I'm doing it as I'm speaking to you, right to the bottom of your screen, 2 options there for you. Click on the French, and then you will hear the French translation. Dr. Fofana, take it away.
Voilà. Chers collègues panélistes, chers organisateurs, chers invités, je suis ravie et reconnaissante de me joindre donc à cette discussion sur le thème « Unir nos forces pour l'action climatique, perspective des sociétés civiles africaines et européennes ». Je vous remercie bien sincèrement de cette opportunité que vous me donnez afin de voir dans cette situation mondiale nos relations avec nos partenaires africains et aussi de bénéficier d'une action commune, non seulement pour contrer la pandémie, mais aussi toutes les menaces qui pèsent sur notre planète et nos moyens de subsistance. Nous voulons discuter aujourd'hui de la manière dont nous pouvons résoudre ensemble la crise climatique et la crise de la COVID-19. Comment poursuivre les objectifs climatiques et renforcer simultanément la résilience. Mes collègues de parti, les Verts, et moi-même prenons très au sérieux la question du dérèglement climatique et ses répercussions. Au sein du Parlement européen, nous ne nous contentons pas seulement de faire pression pour que la justice climatique soit davantage prise en compte en général. Elle doit être intégrée dans tous les domaines, mais aussi, plus particulièrement, nous faisons prendre conscience que le changement climatique trouve son origine dans des activités humaines et les émissions de gaz à effet de serre, et que l'Union européenne doit être responsable vis-à-vis du reste du monde. Dans cette semaine, au cours de notre plénière, nous allons d'ailleurs débattre et voter le rapport sur l'incidence du changement climatique sur les populations vulnérables des pays en développement, ainsi que le rapport sur les effets du changement climatique sur les droits de l'homme et le rôle des défenseurs de l'environnement en la matière. Ce qui montre que lentement, mais sûrement, les défis climatiques reçoivent plus d'attention et sont présentés et examinés de manière plus nuancée. En tant que vice-présidente de développement de la Commission développement, et rapporteur fictif pour la stratégie Union européenne-Afrique et le rapport sur le rôle de l'aide humanitaire de l'Union européenne pour contrer les effets de la pandémie la COVID-19 dans les pays en développement, ma perspective est de consolider la relation Union européenne-Afrique d'une manière significative et viable pour les deux continents, mais aussi pour la planète. La crise de la COVID-19, avec ses effets sans précédent sur l'économie, les relations extérieures et la vie sociale, représente une occasion unique de réamener les questions relatives à la nouvelle société et à nos nouvelles relations, c'est-à-dire un partenariat d'égal à égal, et de mettre en doute ou réfuter même les inadéquations structurelles. Cela vaut également pour la justice climatique ou, par exemple, pour le pacte vert. Les objectifs du pacte vert concernent principalement l'Union européenne, mais ces objectifs ont aussi pour but de s'engager avec des partenaires internationaux pour soutenir la transition mondiale. Ce partenariat d'égal à égal, de mon point de vue, nous oblige, nous, les institutions européennes, à examiner minutieusement le degré d'intégration de nos programmes, nos feuilles de route et les stratégies de l'Union européenne par rapport aux réalités du continent africain. Si nous examinons les relations entre l'Union européenne et l'Afrique dans ce contexte, nous devons noter que la transition verte et le développement durable peuvent avoir des significations différentes sur les deux continents et que l'échange des vues et de besoins en matière de protection de l'environnement, de durabilité et de neutralité climatique n'est pas une condition préalable automatique. Nous devons donc investir activement dans la justice climatique. Au sein de la commission développement, je mets l'accent sur les questions de développement concernant la sécurité et la souveraineté alimentaire qui sont une priorité pour de nombreux pays africains, car ils sont très influencés par notre comportement ici en Europe de production et de consommation et aussi ses effets sur la planète. La justice climatique est intimement liée à la sécurité alimentaire. On a longuement débattu la semaine dernière en Afrique du Sud de la manière dont les effets du changement climatique entravent la sécurité alimentaire et de la nécessité d'intervenir dans ce domaine pour protéger la nutrition et la sécurité alimentaire. Le thème de la justice climatique met en évidence la diversité et la complexité des défis sur les deux continents. Nous devons considérer tout spécialement les jeunes et les femmes dans ce contexte, étant donné que la jeunesse du continent africain et le leadership des femmes dans l'agriculture de subsistance semblent être méconnus. Or, les agricultrices représentent plus de 50% de la population sur le continent africain. La justice climatique, notamment en ce qui concerne la garantie d'une alimentation saine par des pratiques agricoles durables et la protection de la biodiversité, est fondamentale pour tout type de développement et exige une réponse multisectorielle. Je pense que des initiatives telles que le pacte vert ou la stratégie de la ferme à la table ont un grand potentiel pour inclure des priorités qui placent nos populations et notre planète au centre, car elles sont interdisciplinaires et multisectorielles. En tant que vice-présidente de la délégation du Parlement européen pour les relations avec le Parlement africain, je suis particulièrement préoccupée par la façon dont nous, le Parlement européen, envisageons notre engagement sincère avec nos partenaires africains, notamment lors de la mise en œuvre des projets déjà mentionnés. La présidente de la Commission européenne, Mme Ursula von der Leyen, a suggéré que le pacte vert africain, elle a suggéré un pacte vert africain lors du forum Union européenne-Afrique il y a quelques semaines. Toutefois, l'Afrique ne représentant que 2% des émissions de carbone dans le monde, l'Union européenne doit rester consciente des différentes responsabilités qu'elle a dans ce domaine-là. Je me réjouis, c'est du moins mon impression, que le thème de la justice climatique prend de plus en plus de place au sein des institutions de l'Union européenne. Je constate également le leadership de plus en plus important que prend la jeunesse. Je vous donne un exemple. Tout à l'heure, il y a exactement moins d'une heure, avant de vous rejoindre ici, j'ai eu un échange avec des jeunes de Tanzanie et d'Irlande et qui travaillent ensemble sur le suivi des engagements de leur gouvernement local en matière d'action climatique. Ils avaient des idées très claires sur ce qu'ils pensaient devoir changer pour protéger l'environnement dans lequel ils vivent. En outre, les Journées européennes du développement de cette année sont consacrées au thème « Le pacte vert pour un avenir durable » et elles réunissent des jeunes leaders climatiques des pays en développement pour discuter et construire, et je dirais même reconstruire, des sociétés et des économies plus vertes et plus inclusives dans la phase post-Covid-19. Je pense que vouloir protéger notre planète pour les générations futures avec des solutions intelligentes et innovantes, en partant d'un lieu d'apprentissage et d'échange, est la meilleure base pour un partenariat durable et fructueux, capable de surmonter les moments difficiles du passé et de l'avenir. Nous savons tous que la justice climatique touche de nombreux domaines dans nos vies et nos relations. Et dans le cadre donc de mon travail parlementaire au sein de notre commission, j'ai vu les effets du changement climatique sur les systèmes alimentaires, sur la dynamique des conflits, les migrations et les déplacements, le genre et bien d'autres encore. Je suis sûre que nous aurons le temps d'aborder certains sujets au cours de notre discussion. Et je vous remercie bien sincèrement de votre attention.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Merci beaucoup for that, Dr. Fofana. Much appreciated. Talking about Europe's responsibility in climate justice. And we look forward, of course, to the engagement that we will be having in the Q&A time. Of course, I would like to remind members of the audience that your questions are needed because I will be putting them to the panelists as you see them. Our next speaker is the man who comes after the women. And I do want to introduce to you Ovais Samad. He is coming to us from the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat, or what you would call as the UNFCCC, where he serves as the Deputy Executive Secretary. Now, he supports the Executive Secretary in managing the UNFCCC Secretariat and its staff on advising on a range of issues relating to the strategic operations, planning, and the development of the organization. We asked him a question coming into this, and he's going to be unpacking this for us now. Where are we today in the international fight against the climate crisis? And what did we achieve with the Paris Agreement that was signed back then? He has the data for us. He's going to be giving us an overview on whether or not the Paris Agreement of 2015, we keep hearing about it and whether countries are adhering to it, but what have we achieved since signing that agreement? I will now hand over the floor to him. Ovais, thank you so much for being here, and it is now for you.
Christine, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the organizers for bringing us together in this very meaningful and an important gathering, and wish to acknowledge and my fellow panelists, very distinguished group of colleagues who have already shared their very valuable perspectives from their regions that they represent, including Hindu, who we know very well. So it was a great pleasure to see her as well. Look, I'll be very brief and frank. The Paris Agreement, as you mentioned, remains our covenant of hope with the people of the world. That is one of the most vibrant and major international agreement that was concluded just over 5 years ago, and remains, as I said, our covenant of hope. Yet, the current levels of climate ambition, as was also mentioned by other speakers, are far from putting nations on the pathway that will meet the goals and targets of the Paris Agreement, which says that we need to prevent global warming to well below 2 degrees, preferably 1.5 degrees by the end of the century. But unfortunately, that is not happening. The combined impact of the nation's ambition levels put them on a path to achieve only 0.5% reduction by 2030. Now listen to this, compared to 2010 levels, but the IPCC tells us that must be reduced by 45%. So there's a huge gap. But having said that, there is hope, and there is a lot of good things that are happening, including, as a previous speaker said, the African governments are updating their NDCs and stepping up their ambitions, and not just in the African region, but all around the world, but still not enough. And I'll come to why and how, because 2021, unfortunately, we are all living through this horrible pandemic. And that actually counterintuitively gives us an unprecedented opportunity. As nations build forward from COVID-19, where we're seeing some signs of recovery and hope that we will soon be, not relatively soon in the near foreseeable future, will be coming out of this pandemic. So, but there is a lot of building, rebuilding needs to be done. And that building, that recovery gives us an enormous opportunity to put those recovery efforts in a way that are green, sustainable, and do not add to the emissions as we have done in the past. Humanity, unfortunately, until now has been threatening its own existence on this planet. We poison the water, we pollute the skies, we destroy nature and undermine the biodiversity that makes life possible. Recent research from Finland estimates that the current trajectory puts a third of global food production at risk by 2001, by the end of the century. And the more we delay the urgently needed change, the more dangerous it becomes. We see the climate emergency getting worse throughout the world, with this year's extreme cold impacting the southern United States, the series of hurricanes ravaging the Caribbean, typhoons in Asia, and more. 2020 was one of the hottest 3 years on record, and records are being broken all around the world in different environmental spheres. The past decade was the hottest in human history. The global average temperature in 2020 was about 1.2 degrees above pre-industrial level. This year in Arctic, for instance, temperatures were more than 3 degrees above average and more than 5 degrees in southern Siberia. And that's not an aberration. It's actually the new normal. Altogether, between 2000 and 2019, more than almost 500,000 people have lost their lives as direct results of more than 11,000 extreme weather events globally, and losses amounting to almost $3 trillion, and we lose count of that. All of this, along with the delay in the NDCs, indicate that we have an incredible amount of work to do, but we can fix this. We need stronger NDCs in 2021, and we are working towards that tirelessly, day and night. We need success at COP26, as also mentioned. We will have the COP26 Glasgow conference, climate change conference later this year, which is turning out to be a very successful preparatory process at this stage. And we're seeing a lot of commitments and hope towards getting that conference and agreement of the conference that will turn the tide. And last but not least, one point I'd like you to take away is all of this to say that we do not have time, and the actions that we need to take, especially in the recovery from the COVID, we need to be really bold, courageous, and make transformative changes at all levels of society, private sector, governments, and political leadership. Back to you, Christiane.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Samad. We do not have time, and let's deliberate upon that as we engage in this conversation. We simply do not have time. I want to introduce our final panelists now. This will be the final input, and after Pia, we will then be getting into the Q&A. So Pia is head of climate policy at the Klimadelegation. She has been working in many projects for climate empowerment, such as building bridges for climate action. And currently she's with the Youth Rising Up for NDCs. Now, Pia is currently also working for the NGO German Watch as a research and project assistant in the areas of resilience, climate risk management, adaptation, and human rights. Young people are really at the forefront of the fight in terms of raising awareness. We see them in their activism, and Pia is really the face of that. And Pia, I want to hand over to you now, because you're going to be talking to us about whether or not the global community is doing enough from the perspective of young activists who are going out there raising awareness of the issue. So over to you now, Pia.
Thank you very much, Christine. Thanks to the organizers and my fellow panelists. I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion and exchange. I want to directly connect to what Uwais Samad said. We don't have time, and members of my organization, Klimadelegation, are participating in the international climate processes since 2012. So we know that the clock is ticking. Every day, every hour, 6 years and 7 months left to stay within the 1.5 degree limit. And we are currently not doing enough. We are not doing enough from a scientific perspective, since we all know how much of a difference half a degree makes. And we also know that even if we stay within this 1.5 degree limit, there will be inevitable impacts, tipping points, and the danger of multi-system collapse. Because while these targets are negotiated, science is not negotiable. From a political perspective, we are not doing enough, since still, with all current policy pledges and targets, we are on a pathway of 2.4 to 3 degrees. And while I acknowledge the efforts, I also have to clearly say that from a perspective of intergenerational equity and climate justice, no, doing something is not doing enough. Not for young people around the world from my generation, nor for the coming ones. And speaking of conflicts, migration, food insecurity, water scarcity, impacting fundamental rights, impacts that are already globally felt, especially by marginalized communities, including youth and children. The German Constitutional Court just weeks ago ruled that the danger of restrictions of civil liberties for younger generations due to delayed climate action is too high. Tick tock, 6 years, 7 months. It's the year 2021. A lot of time has passed already, and we keep renegotiating medium and long-term targets as long as they suddenly become short-term goals. I have the feeling that talks referring to the protection of future generations have been going on for so long that we missed the point when suddenly the future generations have long been the present generations. So what needs to be done? The aim of today's conference is to highlight ambitious climate policy rooted in solidarity. For me, solidarity means across regions, but also across generations. We need climate policy that is deeply rooted in the precautionary principle and human rights, that finally takes serious action also to the inevitable impacts, losses, and damages. We need a climate policy that acknowledges and accounts for the interconnectedness of multiple crises, biodiversity, health, poverty. In concrete terms, states must live up to their responsibility to reduce emissions domestically and building long-term resilience. But resilience does not mean bouncing back. It does mean bouncing forward in transformational ways. Climate action needs to be key in all COVID-19 responses. Over the past few years, the EU, Europe, has missed its opportunity to work closely with the African continent to manage climate protection as a shared opportunity. However, the pandemic is opening a window for this, to align the recovery agendas for maximum cooperation for instance, a European-African Green Deal. If COVID-19 has taught us anything, It is that we need more international cooperation, building on each other's strengths and learning from mutual experience. We must rise up for true solidarity and justice. Finance is one crucial aspect of this. Too much climate finance has been directed through loans. This is not only not in line with the polluters pay principle, but gets even more unacceptable since it's the younger generation that carries the debt. In general, we need a change of mindset. Us Europeans must overcome our Eurocentric ways of thinking originating in old colonial structures of dependencies. Instead, we must widen our perspective and truly approach our counterparts with mutual respect and esteem. Africa and Europe must be strategic partners and neighbors. In all this, civil society and youth in particular play a key role. Youth groups as leaders and partners can change the narrative of historically viewing Africa-European relations through colonialism. Aligning youth engagement strategies of both continents, providing support and instruments for young people to collaborate between the regions and solve global challenges together, as my organization strives to do, is a smart investment in the future. It is time now for bolder, young, and new visions. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you so much for that, Pia. A lot for us to consider coming out of that remark. And you can sense the urgency coming through over there. Thank you so much for reminding us of just how urgent this is. I will keep this in my mind throughout the day. 6 years and 7 months. The clock is ticking indeed. At this point in time, we're going to be opening up to our conversation, but we've prepared a little something for you. My colleague, Anna Lemon, has been taking a visual take to everything that we have been discussing, everything that you've been hearing. She's a graphic artist, and so she has been putting it down in her art form. And we just want to show that to you now in terms of what has been said so far from the panelists before I open up the question and answer. So there it goes. My colleague Daniel has opened this up. Wow, look at that. Joining forces for climate action, African and European civil society. Can you see that? We're seeing the words action. Look at it. We can see 100% renewables, right? We can see solar panels on the continent. We can see wind farms being constructed over there. I just want you to have a look at the future. Climate justice. These are some of the things that we've heard. The responsibility of Europe. We heard that from Dr. Fofana. So this is just some of the things that we have been listening to from the input of our panelists. That visual representation by my colleague Anna Lemon as we have been going. And of course, you can watch that as it's developing. That's on the webpage, the landing page that I have, of course, directed to you in the beginning of the conference. Of course, if you registered, you should have that link where you can actually follow the graphic recording as we go through the conference. I see predictable financing there as well. So ladies and gentlemen, we're now entering the discussion phase of the panel. And of course, I want your questions to come through. It is my desire to bring them through, of course, to those who are taking part in the panel. Ovais, I'm going to bring you back in here first and foremost, because again, we are gathered about, it's just as we were being reminded, that this is about climate policy rooted in solidarity. Mr. Samad Ovais. So I wanted to ask you how we can strengthen international solidarity and build more trust when it comes to global climate action. How do we do that?
Christine, thank you again. And thanks also to the previous speaker who had some very thoughtful perspectives to share, and we fully agree with everything that has been said there. And we're very grateful to the youth, and especially the younger generation, who have stepped up and reminding everybody at all levels about the responsibility we have. Now, more specifically to your question, how do we build trust and how do we take things forward? One thing going back to the Paris Agreement, when the Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015, there were a number of promises that were made at that time. The first being provision of finance and technology to the developing countries to manage, adapt to the impacts of climate change. And that was more specifically $100 billion a year starting in 2020. So what we are advocating and working with all governments around the world is promises that have been made, promises must be kept. And that's where you get into building that trustful relationship and bring everybody on board to do what they have promised to do. And what did they promise to do is to implement what they agreed in the Paris Agreement to keep the temperatures below 2 degrees, preferably 1.5 degrees, through a range of actions across the societies, communities, business processes, financial institutions, and so on. So the implementation needs to happen. We have had enough time to talk about how to implement. We have had enough time to negotiate the various aspects of how that implementation needs to happen. As I mentioned, we are now almost out of time. We need to really shift to the implementation. And lastly, also another next point would be to lower emissions and raise ambitions. And that has to be done in parallel. So we have, as I mentioned in my previous intervention, we have a fantastic opportunity as we recover from the COVID and build back forward, build back better, or build back forward, whatever you might want to refer to. We have a great opportunity here. So we need to do that. And then finally, also that leave no voice or solution behind. We are all in this together. The beauty of Paris Agreement is it does not differentiate or distinguish between governments and civil society, public sector, private sector, individuals. Paris Agreement requires all sectors of the society and stakeholders to come together and take those actions at all different levels. So therefore, what we must do is that we leave no voice behind and to capture the solutions. There are plenty of solutions out there in different countries and with different innovators around the world, and all of that needs to be captured and scaled up. So that's what I'd say. And if we do all that together, and there are, as I said, signs of hope, and all of that is happening, just not at the pace and the scale that we need to reach the targets. So we just need to accelerate and increase those ambitions. So if we are able to do that, then we are on a good path to build that trust and confidence among all stakeholders. Back to you, Christine.
Thank you so much for that. And, you know, you've really gotten to the heart of the question that was asked by Dauda, because he said that the commitments to the Paris Agreement aren't being fully respected, noting that COVID-19 has been so disruptive, but you did indeed talk about harmonizing policy and how nobody should be left behind. Thank you so much, Hindu. I see you there. And I'm glad that you've turned your video on, because I would like for all of you now to keep your videos on. Hindu, the European Commissioner, Ursula von der Leyen, of course, you are familiar, and you did talk about the European Green Deal. We also heard from MEP Fofana that they have a European Green Deal, and the European Commissioner has now called for an African Green Deal. Tell me, what are your thoughts on that? Do we need a Green Deal in Africa? And is it just the same template and adapting it to the African context? How do you interpret calls for an African Green Deal?
Right. So when we see the European Green Deal, they started when they get impacted by COVID-19. So that gives them a wake-up call to say, oh no, we need to change. We need to invest in a greener way, because we know when we invest in nature, nature protect us, protect our health. So of course we need an African Green Deal, but we need the African Green Deals that is adapt to the African realities, who cannot do as usual as development copy and paste, because that is not working at all. So African Green Deals must be based on the African solutions led, because we know that even the developing countries around the world, the small islands or the Africa or Asian or whatever that the Latin American countries, they do have one important resources. This is nature. Even we are most impacted, we still have our nature. We still have our forests who are there, who are protecting us from all the greenhouse gases, who are the best solutions that we have. And we have also our youngest population in Africa, who are the hope, who can build the Green Deal based on our needs and our realities. That's why I say, it is very important to change the reality shifting that Africa must build up the Green Deal based on the renewable energy, to give hope, to give jobs to the youth, and to also rebuild back better our environment and ecosystem. We can fight climate change. We can fight it only if we have 30% of the solution based on the nature. Even we can cut everything. But if we didn't invest and protect nature, we cannot going to reach neutrality. So Africa must be based on need. And what we need that Europe support, because Europe have the responsibility of creating climate change. So they cannot just continuously commit it and talk. We wanted to see action. Like in my community, I wanted to see how the action can be turned up, all the heat, through a realities of the survival or the natural resources to be protected. So that's what we want in African Green Deals, to be really for peoples and for planet.
Thank you so much for that, Henry. The Honorable MEP, I'm going to ask you to respond, because you are the European voice here, Dr. Hetzberger-Fofana, if you could respond to that. But we are talking about partnership, and I wondered, what are the challenges of partnership with these two neighboring continents? Can you talk to us about some of the challenges as you've experienced them in the partnership? And the answer, of course, to Hindu's call, that those who are responsible, and we are talking about this part of the world, we need more commitment. So over to you, Dr. Hetzberger-Fofana. And again, a reminder to our audience, this is the time when you need to change your translation so that you can hear in English what is being spoken in French.
Alors, merci bien pour cette question. En effet, nous avons de nombreux défis à relever en ce qui concerne la réalisation du pacte vert. Tout d'abord, le premier défi, c'est que les objectifs du pacte vert, c'est aussi de s'engager à favoriser la transition verte dans nos pays partenaires. Et cela, comme l'a dit Madame Hindou auparavant, en tenant compte donc des réalités du pays et en changeant nos feuilles de route, c'est comme je l'ai dit aussi, changer nos feuilles de route, changer nos stratégies, et surtout, nous voulons travailler, c'est peut-être le grand défi que nous avons actuellement, c'est de travailler sur le même pied d'égalité, donc d'égal à égal, dans le respect évidemment des propositions qui sont faites aussi de toutes parts. C'est un défi qui va dans tous les domaines. C'est le défi que nous avons aussi au niveau de la jeunesse qui nous interpelle, aussi bien la jeunesse européenne que la jeunesse africaine. Je vous ai dit tout à l'heure que j'avais eu une conférence avec des jeunes d'Afrique et de l'Europe, et c'était leur problème numéro un. On veut entendre la jeunesse, cette jeunesse qui est l'avenir du monde, qui est carrément l'avenir du monde, mais cette jeunesse-là, elle doit savoir que lorsqu'elle nous interpelle, nous les écoutons et nous essayons aussi de traduire leurs espoirs, leurs visions en des formes concrètes. Tout d'abord, il faut que ce soit concret, et ainsi, on va un peu, je dirais, débloquer, si on veut, débloquer le fil intergénérationnel et inclure en même temps toutes les communautés, et les femmes, les communautés marginalisées, toutes les nombreuses communautés marginalisées. Et c'est dans ce sens-là que nous avons de nombreux défis encore à relever afin que le pacte vert, que ce soit le pacte vert, comme on a dit, un pacte vert africain, mais aussi un pacte vert qui deviendra un pacte vert mondial, dans l'espoir que nous allons faire de notre planète une planète où il fera bon vivre pour tout le monde, parce que nous aurons aussi respecté la biodiversité. Et respecter la nature, c'est vraiment le plus grand défi, en fait, que nous avons, surtout en Europe. Ça a été pendant très longtemps négligé, on a passé au-dessus de la nature, on a cru qu'en industrialisant à outrance, on pouvait mieux réussir, on pouvait mieux vivre, et aujourd'hui on se rend compte que la nature se venge. La nature s'est vengée maintenant, et elle nous interpelle aussi, elle nous dit stop, arrêtez, et tenez compte aussi que c'est la nature, cette nature-là que vous avez un peu, je dirais, violée, hein, elle réclame son dû. Et je pense que ce sont tous ces défis-là que nous voulons avec nos partenaires du continent africain, des autres pays, de l'Asie, des ACP, de tous les ACP, que nous voulons renouveler afin de faire de la planète, comme je le répète, un endroit où il fera bon vivre pour tout le monde.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Pia, I want to come to you there because we heard a lot about young people, and I'm interested for you to tell us what we can learn from young people, youth-led movements in Europe and in Africa. Pia?
Well, first of all, I think what is crucial is that young people very intuitively learn how to connect among each other. We are a generation that is reaching out across regions, across continents, which aims for cooperation very intuitively. So, for instance, Klimadelegation in the past years has always at its core strive for cooperating projects among youth globally. We did this last year with youth from Latin America and the Caribbean, but also since the COP27 will most likely take place at the African continent, it is very likely that we see a lot of cooperations coming up and already starting this year. And I think this working hand in hand, exchanging very diverse perspective, very diverse experiences, realities is crucial to understand each other's approaches to climate protection. There are so many different ways, so many different problems that young people experience in different world regions. So we cannot apply a one-size-fits-all approach, but we need to sit down together. We need to have a dialogue. We need to exchange on an eye level, and we need to understand each other better. We need to build bridges across the regions, reach out to each other, build on each other's particular strengths, and support each other where we see weaknesses maybe, or we improve new ways together, innovate. And I think what is crucial is that young people claim places in decision-making processes as well. And I think my generation has started not to let themselves be told that decision-making is for politicians. No, it is not. Every single citizen, especially the young generation, has a stake in political decisions because they are about our future in the end. And in claiming these spaces, which was for a long time not just normal, we just get to communicate our positions. We make spaces, we create spaces, and we also make room for each other. For instance, with our project Building Bridges for Climate Action, we said as a German youth NGO, we always talk to German decision makers, and they know our positions, they know our perspectives, but they don't always hear in their day-to-day life the positions of people from other world regions. So we made this space. We organized a program where specifically youth from, for instance, Latin America in this case, came to sit down at roundtables with decision makers, with stakeholders from Germany, so that they get the chance to communicate their positions. And I think that is important, to empower each other in this way.
Thanks for that, Pierre. And you threw to COP27, but before we get to COP27, there will be a COP26, and that's where I want to bring you in, Ovais, because I believe we have a few more minutes with you before you've got to dash off to your next appointment, and we're releasing him, ladies and gentlemen, because he is doing the good work. So I wanted you to just talk to us about COP26. Should we be optimistic about this? Will it be a game changer, COP26, Ovais?
In short, yes. COP26 is going to be a major turning point, as I said, and we are seeing building up of the momentum, the enthusiasm, the commitment. Recently, the US President's Summit that brought 40 countries, the biggest emitters, so to speak, together, and they all raised very significantly their ambitions and commitments to reach those net zero targets by the mid-century and limit the global warming to Paris Agreement goals and targets. But as I said right at the beginning, all of that is good, but not enough. So COP26 gives us an enormous and momentous opportunity to build up, to continue to build up that momentum. And we, in a week's time, we will be heading to what we call the subsidiary body preparatory meetings. And those are happening virtually over a period of 3 weeks in preparation of the COP. And that includes all government, civil society organizations, youth representatives, to bring forward, to work on the decisions that will be taken at the COP26 in Glasgow. To support that, we also have regional climate weeks. Last week we had a climate week in Latin America, and those are conducted in different regions of the world, essentially again to bring the different stakeholders, because our role as the UN Climate Change Organization Secretariat is to provide a platform for all stakeholders to participate, to engage, to understand, to inform each other, and help facilitate good decisions at the end of that process. So it's a very complex, highly engaging process, but the platform that is provided through our secretariat and organization remains the best hope for the international community, both government, civil society, private sector, foundations, and individuals to come together and be part of that story. And as the youth representatives have said, and I agree with every word Pia has just said, that they are integral part of that process and decision making, because it's their future we're talking about. It's their future that we are concerned with, and we need to make sure that we hand over that responsibility, that is the safe, green, resilient, and sustainable environment, to the next generation. That is our responsibility, and that's what we must do. And so COP26 is definitely, I wouldn't say make it or break it, but a huge, huge, huge opportunity. And we are seeing some very good and positive signs that will be a major turning point. So let's remain engaged, committed, and amplify the voices as you have done through this event, bringing different stakeholders, in this case, to two very important regions of the world, Africa and Europe, to engage and convey those three key critical messages for everyone to take note of and be aware that world is watching. Back to you, Christian.
Thank you so much for that, Ovais. So optimism about the upcoming COP26, which will be held in Glasgow, that it's going to be a game changer. It's certainly one that we'll be watching. Now, I'm a journalist, ladies and gentlemen, and I can tell you, if you want to feel good, the news is not always the thing that you want to watch or read to feel good. But the other day, it was actually a news bulletin that cheered me up. And I'll tell you why. I did tell you in the beginning that I'm from Zimbabwe. And I was watching a particular network, and a story came on about, of course, my eyebrows were raised because it was in Zimbabwe, where I'm from. It was a village in Zimbabwe, And women in Zimbabwe, in this village, and what these women do is they work on the farms, they grow food to feed their families, and sometimes they even grow enough to be able to sell and make income in that way. But there was this unique partnership. So a startup in Berlin, these guys are recycling batteries or something of the sort. And they're taking these recycled batteries and they're putting them into scooters. These become electronic scooters. And they have sent those scooters to these women in rural Zimbabwe. And what the women are able to do is they're able to take what they grow in the farms, load them onto these e-scooters, and transport them to the market where they can sell their produce for income. They're now, because they've got more mobility, you can imagine, they have access to more economic opportunities. Some of them are running businesses with their e-scooters, running transport ferry services where through the mobile devices, they're able to gather a few villagers who want to go to the town, and they've got a shuttle service. Empowerment, and that is the classic sort of partnership that we're talking about, where solutions that are being created on the one end, because there are all these batteries here that need to be recycled, and now it's feeding a green solution and empowering women in my part of the world. So Hindu, that's what I see. That's the image I have when I think of partnership. We have a problem on our continent, Hindu, is that a lot of us, a lot of young people like yourself and I, find themselves unemployed. There are no economic opportunities. We've seen many of them take the dangerous trek of going through the Mediterranean to try to get to Europe because they feel that there are no opportunities abroad. Now we're talking about opportunities that could be created if we build green, if we build a green future. You talked about the fact that clean energy is now becoming more affordable, but talk to us about the kind of opportunities. Tell our audience about the kind of opportunities, economic opportunities that could be realized for our young people on the continent if we are to make investments, if we see European investment coming in terms of green investments on the continent of Africa. So Hindu, over to you.
Thank you. Christine, I'm going to take right from the wording that you left, what is happening in Zimbabwe. It's happening in many of our countries in Africa. So how people are so smart, recycling things and do not just like extracting from nature. You know, I just came 2 days ago from Uganda. And then I saw it is the same what is happening in Chad, like you say, in Zim and also in other countries. Young people are turning the old car, not to the west. They're turning the doors into a suitcases, the wheels into a cooking stuff. So they're turning into the last piece of the iron in the car. And when you come to the Europe, they just like trash them and change to a new product. And as you said also, the hope is in our food production. You know, when I see just around Europe, you go to the supermarket, each kind of the food have an aspirational day. But when you call back to Africa, we never draw up our food because there is no aspirational day. If you have your food, it is more enough. You give it to your neighbor. If it is too much, you dry it up to share it and eat it. So we are so innovators peoples. Our young generation becoming a more startup, not in the technologies that coming from outside, but from inside technology. Let me give you an example from my own community. You know, in a nomadic pastoralist communities, the women have the responsibility of milking and selling the milk product and eating for themselves. We do not depend from the end of the month salads. We depend from the rainfall. We depend from the nature. And that's how also we know how to live in harmony with the nature. It is the case of so millions of the young people. When we are growing up, we are getting inspired from how we can learn from this nature. So what the women do there, they are really a hero. During the dry season, they know where to cap the food, when to cap the water in order to feed them families and to build them a small economy. In the rain season, they know how to take the nature to be sustained for the next coming years. So we need to get inspired from those young women who are building back a new innovative solutions based on restorations, based on production that they really do it in sustainable way, based on equitable way of sharing of resources. I think we have the hope. And I think people like you, me, and Pia can make a great partnership across the two continents to give the hope to other young women and young boys who can do not just to jump to the sea, but who can build back in their own communities. That's what I'm so hopeful about it. And just to end up, I'm so agree with my friend Ovis, who said that COP26 gives us hope, but how COP26 can build the resilience to bridge to the COP27, and that the young people in Africa can show the way we are changing the world every day.
Wonderful to hear from you, Hindu. Very good to see you. Lovely to see you. Hope to see you soon.
Oves, before you go, I've got a few questions coming in. Thank you so much, guys. In terms of the questions that are coming in, I want to throw this one to Oves. It's coming to us from one of our participants, or our audience members really, who's asking about climate change being closely linked to population growth. He's looking for the expert view on that. He's asking, does the world have certain limits when it comes to the population? So the question here is, again, for you, Oves, he believes, that is our participant here, Stefan, that climate change is closely linked to population growth. What is your view from the UNFCCC? And also, does the world have certain limits when it comes to the population?
That's an important question, and we do not make those links, and we do not believe that there is a direct correlation of causality, the population growth and climate change. Climate change, the impacts of climate change that we are seeing, is mainly the result of irresponsible use of limited resources at our disposal. If you're able to do that, then it doesn't directly relate to the size of the population in any part of the world, for that matter. So I think we need to focus on responsible and more sustainable use of those resources, which is the direct cause of the impact of climate, or reversing the trend of climate change. So that is where our focus should be, and not on other trends which are highly politicized at times and touch upon human rights and humanity's existence in principle. So no, so I hope that answers the question.
Okay, it's a firm answer, which we seldom get. I can tell you from my experience in journalism, I got the answer there. So I hope that does it for you, Stefan. I will be coming to you shortly, Dr. Herzberger-Fofana, but I do want to come to you, Pia, because somebody has pointed out something that you spoke on, that the involvement of private investments, right? You talked about the financing of the fight against climate change. One of our users here, I hope I'm pronouncing the name right, Hervé, and this is coming to us from Cameroon, is saying that the financing of the fight against climate change in developing countries, the suggestion here is that it further increases the economic debt of these countries. You talked about this, Pia, because of the imperative of return of investment. What do you recommend to fight other climate injustice that powerful states inflict on weak states? And I'm asking you this, Pia, because you did raise this, and I know that you have an economic background from your academic studies. So we're potentially saying we want to address climate injustice. We're calling on private sector investment, but because of the burden of having to get returns, we might see weak states signing up for the kind of funding, and you talked about this, that is not perhaps sustainable. Can you speak to that, please, for us, Pia?
Yes, of course. And I think Hindu also referred to the issue of that in her statement before, and that heads of states, decision makers are currently convening to discuss this. And I think this is a crucial point. Also, in terms of the norm of solidarity between the African region and Europe, because global solidarity also means that when we see that there are multiple crises in one region, that we need to make sure that the region is able to bounce back by itself without putting even more pressure on it. And I think that climate finance or developing finance and other finance that is hugely directed through loans is actually an additional burden and does not comply with the polluters pay principle. Additionally, as I said, the thought that not only do the developing countries pay back this debt, but the younger generations in these developing countries will. So it's a double burden for me. And so I think that cuts, and this was negotiated in the German parliament last year and was declined, sadly, is one key measure that needs to happen to restore trust and restore global solidarity. And this is an important sign from Europe to the African continent, I think.
Sorry, Pierre, I want you said something that I'm not really familiar with. Polluters must pay principle. Tell our audience what that is.
Yeah, so it is basically a principle of environmental law, which says that these states, or actors actually, that this can also comply for private actors, that polluted the most, emitted the most GHG emissions, CO2 emissions, have to contribute the bigger share to mitigate the impacts, to also support other countries, developing countries and other states who are most affected and have contributed less to the current status of the crisis, to be able to develop further, to be able to develop in a carbon neutral way, to develop and build prosperity amongst this, because the biggest emitters had a historical advantage in building up their wealth. And this is a very crucial point, which is still not resolved and is still an issue between the two regions. And as I said, it is important to rethink as Europeans and how to approach this issue.
Okay, so definitely you've opened up something there, both of you, Hindu, Pierre, as well as the question that has come to us. That is certainly one that we need to be deliberating further on. And of course, I know this was specific also to the private sector and allowing them to come into the financing, but of course, understanding that they've got to, show for their returns to shareholders. And that could create an environment where weak states really suffer. And we've been told that the generations to come are the ones who have to pay for that. Dr. Fofana, there is another question here, and Alexis rightly points out that the COVID-19 recovery provides a global opportunity to raise countries' ambitions on tackling climate change. Now, both crises, I'm very familiar with the fact that, and you might have heard it, that COVID-19 has disproportionately affected and impacted women. Look at it from all angles, really. But we have now the question in terms of, isn't this the opportunity now to put women's empowerment and gender equality at the center of both the COVID-19 recovery and, of course, our climate change adaptation and mitigation policy? So, Dr. Hertzberger Fofana, when you engage your colleagues and counterparts in the African Parliament, is it time to be having a conversation about saying, as we look to building back and building green, why don't we also balance out things like making sure that we can put women's empowerment first? Because a lot of our women on the continent in Africa, I can speak for, need to be empowered. So I'll hand over to you now, and then of course a reminder that we need to activate our translation now. So over to you, Dr. Hertzberger Fofana, the Honorable MP in our midst.
Alors, tout d'abord, je tiens à vous dire qu'au niveau du Parlement européen, nous avons voté le plan d'action pour l'égalité des genres cette année, et les femmes donc ont toujours la possibilité donc de prendre la parole. En ce qui concerne tout d'abord mon parti, les Verts allemands, nous avons donc l'égalité des genres, nous l'avons vraiment, nous le mettons à tous les points, parce que vous savez que nous présentons donc la prochaine chancelière. Hein. On espère qu'elle sera donc votée, mais ce qu'il y a aussi, nous voulons que cette égalité soit dans tous les pays. Que si cela était possible, bien sûr, nous n'imposons rien. Nous ne pouvons pas imposer, nous pouvons simplement demander à ce que les pays, nos pays partenaires aussi travaillent dans ce sens-là. Je sais que le problème de l'égalité des genres dans certains pays d'Afrique, c'est très mal vu. Ce n'est pas apprécié à sa juste valeur. C'est dommage parce que de nombreuses femmes, surtout je pense à toutes ces jeunes femmes comme vous, comme Hindou, comme toutes les autres, qui sont énormément engagées, elles ont la possibilité, par leur voix, par leurs actions, de changer aussi, changer leur localité, changer aussi leur communauté. Et comme vous le dites, comme vous m'avez demandé, oui, au Parlement, nous tendons à l'égalité, même si aujourd'hui encore, je tiens à le dire, aucun pays européen n'a atteint l'égalité des genres. Au Parlement, nous sommes en tout, au Parlement, nous avons environ 41% des femmes sont représentées au Parlement européen. Mon État membre, l'Allemagne, au niveau du Bundestag, c'est 31%, mais aussi nous visons non seulement à l'égalité des genres, ceci dans une approche intersectionnelle, c'est-à-dire il n'y a pas que le genre, il y a aussi des femmes issues de la diaspora, que l'on oublie trop souvent, les minorités, les femmes, on les appelle parfois les minorités visibles, les femmes aussi handicapées, vivant avec un handicap, et aussi les femmes qui ont une autre orientation sexuelle que l'on doit considérer aussi, que l'on tend de plus en plus à considérer au niveau de l'Europe. Évidemment, en Afrique, c'est un autre problème, le problème de l'égalité des genres. Oui. Si, j'espère avoir répondu à la question.
There we go. You absolutely have, and perhaps I want to follow up with you. You've talked about at sort of at a political level. You've talked about the representation there, but I was telling the story about the women in Zimbabwe, and I wondered if maybe the question, I might be adding to the question here, but I'll take the privileges as the moderator to do that. If we could target European investments in terms of climate policy and target women specifically, because women are still largely excluded from the formal economy. And we're talking about a continent where women actually happen to be the most entrepreneurial. In countries like Ghana, for example, there are more women business owners than there are men. So women are more likely to run their own operations, so to say, but they're also the people more likely to be excluded from bank loans, etc. So I'm talking, perhaps I'd like to add to that question, if Europe has plans to say, let's invest specifically at women empowerment initiatives in when we look at financing or money towards development, green development. And Hindu, I'll come to you on that as well, but I want to give Dr. Herzberger Fofana another chance to take on that one.
Alors, comme vous le dites, c'est dans notre budgétisation, c'est prévu justement. Et nous tenons absolument à autonomiser le leadership féminin. Comme vous l'avez dit, au Ghana, j'ai été moi-même et j'ai vu l'entrepreneuriat des femmes ghanéennes. C'est un entrepreneuriat qui est valable pour tous les pays, au moins de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, les pays sahéliens où j'ai été et que je connais. Et il est évident que l'on reconnaît non seulement leur dynamisme, on reconnaît aussi lorsqu'il y a des prêts, leur rapidité à rembourser. Et je pense que là aussi, c'est un avantage, un atout. On parle toujours de leur non-corruption, la non-corruption des femmes entrepreneurs et surtout leur dynamisme. C'est un point qui est prévu et nous voulons aussi les soutenir et aussi investir dans ces petites entreprises familiales ce sont en général de petites entreprises qu'elles ont en général. Hein. Elles n'ont pas de très grandes entreprises. Et vraiment, nous voulons, dans ce sens-là, travailler avec nos partenaires pour que les femmes puissent s'autonomiser, en fait, que cette autonomisation dont on parle, elle est d'abord financière. Et tant qu'elles n'auront pas l'autonomisation financière, c'est évident que c'est plus difficile pour qu'elles puissent arriver à s'épanouir dans leur cadre. Et là, vraiment, nous mettons l'accent là-dessus et nous allons aussi continuer dans nos prochaines réunions. Est-ce que vraiment on va mettre dans la budgétisation la promotion de l'égalité de genre dans cette budgétisation et en tenant compte vraiment que toutes les entreprises tenues par les femmes, les petites entreprises, bien sûr les grandes entreprises ont d'autres moyens et d'autres méthodes. Et elles ont aussi accès plus facilement aux prêts, au financement extérieur, aux investissements, mais vraiment mettre l'accent sur ces entreprises familiales, ces petites entreprises de femmes dans tous ces pays-là. Voilà.
All right, thank you so much for that, Dr. Fofana. So we've heard that there, and I'm hoping that you're taking away, those of you who are in our audience today, that there are specific groups, women in particular, and it's always been proven. I can tell you as an African woman myself that investing in women in Africa will guarantee you returns. Nobody is waiting around for handouts, I can tell you. People are busy getting away and getting on with it. And if we can support these women in our policy, we'll be doing ourselves a good favor. So it is now that time, ladies and gentlemen, where our discussion is coming to a close. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give a round of closing remarks, closing statements. And I'm going to start with you, Ovais, because I do fear that your next meeting will take you away from us. I'll start with you. But before you do that, there is a question here that's coming to us from Uganda. And the question is, how can Africans be protected from land grabbing and foreign investors clearing away African nature? Again, perhaps I can weigh in here. I recently saw again on the news, ladies and gentlemen, I watch a lot of news, a community in Namibia where they are being displaced, where people, foreign investors, a foreign company has come in and basically is clearing land away. I think there's some resources that they would like to tap into over there. So that question coming to us from Uganda, if you perhaps could tackle that in a way that you could, and then of course your closing remarks, and then we'll go in this order after that. I will go over to Dr. Fofana, I'll go over to Pia, and then to Hindu in terms of our closing remarks. So over to you, Ovais, on that. And if you could be brief, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, Christine. And I'll be very brief on that first question. United Nations is not a political organization or an organization that interferes with the sovereign rights of those countries, of all member states in the areas that they have the responsibility. But we do highlight the importance of preserving, safeguarding our natural resources and environment, and that we continuously do, including with the government that you just mentioned. So that needs to, and then to where those practices happen, which are not good for the environment, we do provide, as I said, a platform for all stakeholders to then come and raise their concerns and make that issue more known to the international community, so then appropriate actions can be taken. And I hope that can be done. And we, in the United Nations, we continue to provide that possibility. With regard to a parting message, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Christine, and the organizers for bringing us together. As I mentioned, this has been extremely meaningful. And as I mentioned, we do not have time. We need to really step up our act together and take those decisions at all levels and remind the governments and all stakeholders that they need to take those decisions and actions leading up to COP later this year in Glasgow. So we have a great opportunity, and let's make COP26 a real turning point. And we can do that. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for that, Ovais, a call to all of us there. I'll now hand over to you, Dr. Herzberger Fofana.
Oui. Alors, je vais faire ma remarque de clôture avec une citation d'un écologiste nigérian qui a déclaré que la jeunesse africaine ne pouvait plus se permettre d'être spectatrice de son avenir. Et je crois que cette phrase-là, elle est valable pour la jeunesse du monde entier. Et en ce sens-là, je pense aussi à l'engagement des jeunes, entre autres, par exemple, celui de Madame Vanessa Nakate de l'Ouganda, pour le climat, et qui, elle aussi, nous a un peu reproché que nous ne voyons pas les dirigeants faire ce que nous leur demandons de faire. Et on peut dire que avec cet événement-là que nous avons eu, nous faisons indirectement une promesse de tenir compte vraiment de ce que nous dit la jeunesse, puisqu'elle nous interpelle. Et c'est dans ce sens-là que nous voulons aussi travailler avec donc tous les jeunes du monde et avec les femmes, qui sont les jeunes femmes qui veulent arriver à l'autonomisation. Voilà.
Thank you very much. Pia?
Yes. So I think I made the urgency in my opening statement really clear. So I want to concentrate on the point that if not before, latest since the pandemic, we know that we need more international cooperation. We need to build more on our learnings, more on our mutual strengths, and need to fight together commonly for global solidarity and ambitious actions. And youth is in the center of this, also for ambition raising towards COP26. And investment in youth and youth collaboration in capacity building for youth is an investment in the future. So we need this now.
Christina, I would like to apologize. Unfortunately, I have to leave my other meeting. I'm already a bit late. And I really like to thank the panelists and Christine, you for moderating this excellent session. And I hope to see you all again soon.
See you at COP26.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I have to leave. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Just as well, we got his closing remarks before he had to go. I will tell you that he did actually spare us more time than he thought he could, so we really appreciate that. Okay, and Hindu, you'll close up for us now.
Yeah, so I think I have like 3 quick messages. Firstly, we got a unique opportunity to rebuild a relationship, partnership between Europe and Africa that can be based on a trust, in a confidence that can keep the peoples in the middle, the peoples on the center. Secondly, we cannot do this partnership if we do not all sit in the tables in the equal way, take the decision all together. And Pia said that very clearly. We need young people, women, those who are the most impacted, all the people to sit in the tables, take the decisions. We cannot anymore wait the others take the decision and we implement it. And lastly, I think we have the solutions in our hands. So let us all stand up together in a radical way, change the world and implement those solutions, from the renewable energy to the sustainable agriculture, even to stop the land grabbing, as you said earlier, and to give back the power to the nature to restore himself. And indigenous people's solutions must lead us on joining all the efforts. So thank you so much, Christine. I really appreciate all what you did during this panel.
Thank you, Hindu, and thank you to my very esteemed panelists. It's just the ladies remaining left. Thank you so much. I do not have time to reintroduce you again, but I'm sure people have gotten to know you, and I'm thankful to the contributions that you've made. We have now come to the end of this particular session. We're now going on to a break for the next hour. Now, the workshops will be picking up at 2 p.m. Central European Time. Of course, I introduced the 4 workshops that we have for you after the break. You are welcome to jump along from one workshop to the other. If you have commitment issues like some of us, and you feel, oh, but I'm also interested in another conversation, you're absolutely able to do that. The password for all of the workshops is climate21. Climate, we're gathered about climate, 21, because we're in 2021, all lowercase. So we will be back here Exactly, that is the code, as you can see it coming through on the chat. I just want our technical team to show you our landing page very quickly so that we have a good sense of where we go. So look at that. There are our workshops picking up at 2 p.m. That is Central European Time, CET. There we go, workshop 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There they are. Again, that the password to get in is climate21, all lowercase. You're welcome to absolutely go into any of those workshops. And again, we will then have a networking opportunity at 3:30. So you're asking yourself, how are we going to network? Well, there is what we call the Wonder platform. If you click on that button that says click here to network, you're going to enter the world of virtual networking. Believe you me, it's a fantastic way of doing that. There is a link again that has been posted in the chat. So off we go, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much to everybody who stuck along. Thank you for the questions that have made for enriching discussion. We will continue with that after. And then after the workshops, which will be at 3:45, we will be brought back together. We will get feedback from what we have learned in the workshop. But this was really just an opener of what should come out. The meat is yet still to come, because that's what we'll discuss in the workshop. So make sure to be back to give your input, because that is what we're gathered about here today. So for myself, Christine Mundo, and my esteemed panelists, thank you very much. See you in the workshops in an hour. Good appetit for those who are going to be venturing off for something to eat for lunch, and we will see you back then. So thank you so much, appreciate it, and bye-bye for now. See you soon.